Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a city that seems, on the surface, entirely conventional. Madison, Wisconsin.
Right. It's defined by, those twin blue shields of Lakes Monona and Mendota, and it's powered by this steady rhythm of student life, state government.
But bubbling just beneath that surface, our sources reveal a story of intimate darkness, serial abductions, and a frankly astonishing connection between one woman and the very water that surrounds her.
That contrast is really the perfect starting point for this deep dive. You have the idyllic Midwestern capital versus the deeply personal, almost mythical secrets it holds.
Exactly.
We're synthesizing an extraordinary narrative here, covering a complex criminal investigation where, and this is the wild part, the supernatural quite literally became the only reliable source of intelligence.
Yeah, our source material details these shocking events surrounding what are called the Madison Isthmus abductions. And it really zeroes in on a diner owner, a seemingly ordinary woman named Rachel Matre.
Seemingly ordinary.
Right. But she somehow found herself positioned as, like, the sole agent of truth, armed only with visions provided by what are referred to as the lake spirits.
The central paradox here, as you said, is Rachel Matre herself. I mean, she runs a greasy spoon diner, a very down-to-earth job,
Mm-hmm.
yet she harbors the secret, a deep, physically intimate dependence on the local lakes Monona and Mendota well, to achieve climax.
And this relationship, which she calls her liquid paramour, is what gives her insights that entirely bypass the police, the established systems of investigation, and all the traditional media channels.
It's a direct line to the truth that no one else has.
So our mission today is clear. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding this highly complex web of events. First, we need to detail the horrifying, yet strangely specific, pattern of the serial abductions.
Then second, we have to grasp the sheer scope of Rachel's involvement. Not just her identity as this mysterious blogger, the Lady of the Lakes, but also the profound, demanding nature of these lake spirits.
And finally, we have to analyze the intensely dramatic, trauma-fueled romance that sparks between Rachel and a complicated newcomer, Ethan Walker. Because this story, it's less about who was taken and more about what connected everyone involved.
Trauma, rejection, and this desperate need for release.
Exactly. It's a fascinating confluence of high-stakes crime and profoundly personal healing, all tied inextricably to the aquatic environment of Madison.
So let's start with how this terror began.
Mhm.
Because according to our sources, it all sprang from a moment of, well, seemingly casual rudeness.
The crisis begins with a very clear pattern of abductions. They're targeting young women, specifically college students, right on that densely populated downtown isthmus.
That thin 4-mile stretch of land, yeah. It's bordered by the two lakes, so it's a geographic bottleneck.
And the first victim we learn about is Ling Hu, a 20-year-old student. Her abduction is just jarringly swift.
She's leaving her boyfriend Ken after a shower, feeling totally safe in the humid Wisconsin night, and then she's just yanked into a pickup truck. It happened so fast she can't even scream, just gone.
But before that, there's this critical, seemingly minor interaction that later takes on this enormous significance.
The convenience store.
Right. Ling Hu has this rude, dismissive encounter. She sees a man staring at her. He's described as pale, sweaty, gaunt.
And he compliments the elaborate dragon's foot tattoo that's visible on her lower back. It was only exposed because her genes had written down.
And her response is it's sharp, it's absolute. Fuck you, creep.
And that moment of rejection, it seems to be the trigger. It's fueled by her outrage at him staring at her body, which he, in his mind, views as a potential canvas. And our sources say this moment of being rejected so harshly is what lifts his despair for the first time in weeks.
It's rejection transformed into violent obsession.
Absolutely. And the terror, it just ramps up from there, and it starts drawing a lot of unwanted attention. The next victim is Faith Lucas.
A UW honor student, blonde, a cheerleader, described as a swimsuit model. Her disappearance, unlike Ling Hu's, immediately got major media attention.
And the sources draw a really sharp contrast here, which, it speaks volumes about societal bias. Ling Hu was a foreign student. Her case was pretty quickly marginalized, forgotten by this predominantly white Midwestern city.
But Faith Lucas.
Faith Lucas became the golden girl gone. She drew national media focus, and that just dramatically raised the emotional stakes for the police.
And we have the third victim, Carrie Kimmel. She's 19, a sophomore, abducted near midnight on Gorham Street. And the sequence of her abduction is highly instructive.
It is because it reveals the perpetrator's highly specific and very non-sexual methodology. She's tackled in the darkness, there's a gun involved, and she's driven to a deserted park near Lake Monona.
She thinks this is it. She believes she's facing the prelude to rape and murder.
But what happens next completely disrupts that typical profile of a serial sexual predator. Carrie is forced to strip, but only until she's in her white cotton panties with little red hearts.
And then he just stops.
He stops, he tapes her wrists behind her back, and then, in this incredibly strange display of fastidiousness, he mutters about not being litter bugs as he scoops up her discarded clothes.
And then he touches her sweaty, bare shoulders with what's described as a sigh of satisfaction and says, "There you are."
It's a profound violation, but it's not sexual assault in the way we usually think of it. He meticulously removes her clothing and then stops at the point of penetration or injury.
So the motivation is clearly not physical release.
No, it's about control, ritual, and possession. It suggests an objective that is entirely unique to this perpetrator.
This non-traditional pattern is exactly why the police are so mystified. And it leads us directly to the disruptive influence of Rachel Matre, operating as the anonymous blogger, the Lady of the Lakes.
Her blog becomes this unprecedented source of rapid, unverified information. It's an alternative news stream that just repeatedly spoofs the police and infuriates mainstream journalists.
Oh, the blog is relentless. It posted about the Ling Hu disappearance, and most incredibly, it knew intimate details about the Carrie Kimmel abduction.
Specifically about the girl with the Celtic knot tattoo.
Yes, hours before official police reports were confirmed and released.
So the police detective leading the case, Marty Walker, he is caught between two impossible positions. On one hand, he's intensely annoyed. He calls the blogger an amateur gossip monger who is hindering his investigation.
But on the other hand,
He admits that a tip is a tip. They are forced to use the scoops, knowing the blogger seems to have this privileged line on events the police are still trying to piece together.
this tension, it perfectly illustrates a broader societal friction, doesn't it? The battle between traditional, verified journalism and the speed of the digital age.
Oh, absolutely. You have Julie Schutz, the reporter for the Capital Journal, and she is just lamenting the blog's existence. She sees it as nothing more than gossip that undermines the professional work she and the police are doing.
Yet her own editor, a guy named Sam Garnett, he's acutely aware of the shifting landscape. Garnett explicitly advocates for infotainment.
Right. He prioritizes whether a story or a dramatic picture will make people spend their pocket change to buy the paper.
And Rachel's blog operates entirely outside those commercial and institutional restraints. It offers information that feels almost criminal in its immediacy.
Julie even speculates that only the actual perpetrators could know these things so quickly. That's how far ahead of the curve the blog was.
And the most pivotal piece of early information comes when Ling Hu's body is finally found in Lake Mendota by a couple of fishermen. The post-mortem details that come out after that are critical. They fundamentally redefine the entire case.
Absolutely vital. The preliminary report indicated that Ling Hu died of an asthma attack.
An asthma attack.
Yeah, possibly exacerbated by sleeping pills that were administered by her captor to keep her subdued and quiet. But critically, she was not sexually assaulted.
And this detail, it just changes everything. The classification shifts from murder-rape, which is what the police initially suspected, to abduction and essentially accidental death.
Which radically alters the police investigation. It forces Marty Walker and his team to search for a motive centered on control, or violation of autonomy, or something else entirely, rather than just traditional serial predation.
It shifts the entire perspective. The police are now looking for an offender who is obsessed with control, not necessarily sex or killing.
And this non-sexual controlling motive in the abductions, it just so happens to mirror the unique relationship that Rachel maintains with the Lakes, which forms the supernatural nexus that drives the rest of the story.
Okay, we really have to spend some time on this because the nature of Rachel's relationship with Lakes, Mendota, and Monona is not just eccentric. I mean, it is astonishingly profound and physically defining for her.
It really is. It dictates her entire life, her decision-making process.
This goes far beyond, a simple spiritual appreciation or even some kind of ritualistic practice.
Oh, way beyond. The sources describe it as voluntary, intimate, and profoundly physically satiating for her. She experiences a multi-stage, intense, and satisfying climax, and it's achieved when the water itself grows more solid and literally penetrates her.
She explicitly calls the water her liquid paramour. This dependence dictates her entire sexual availability, or really her lack thereof, to anyone else.
And that dependency is the source of all her frustration outside of the water. She describes any sexual encounter with a man as frustrating and incomplete. She notes that only the lake can bring her to ecstasy.
Which, we learn, was a major factor in her divorce from her ex-husband Don Talley.
Right, because Don became obsessively fixated on making her come. He believed her lack of climax was a failure of his own masculinity. He was completely unaware he was competing with an entire body of water that's inhabited by supernatural entities.
So Rachel felt, in her words, owned by the lake spirits. They were the sole source of her sexual fulfillment, making physical intimacy with other people feel meaningless.
Now, these lake spirits, or beings, or demons, or whatever the hell lived in the lakes, they use these intimate sessions with Rachel as their preferred communication method. They are essentially her exclusive information brokers.
They provide these vivid visions, usually linked to the water itself.
But these visions, they came with crucial limitations. The spirits typically only showed her images from the past, sometimes spanning thousands of years, covering what's called distant prehistory.
And she noted very clearly that they'd given no warning whatsoever about the first two victims, Ling Hu and Faith Lucas.
Right. The information she provided for the blog about those initial cases came entirely from her overhearing police gossip in her diner. She was just reporting history, not solving current events.
So when she performs her ritual following all that drama at her diner, the spirits deliver an unprecedented, shocking message. She's in Lake Monona, deeply saturated in the experience, and then the vision appears.
A terrified young woman, nude except for her panties, a Celtic knot tattoo, and her foot is slipping beneath the water. It's clearly Carrie Kimmel's plight.
And the command from the voices is urgent and contemporary. It breaks all the prior rules.
Save her, the lake spirit said. Save her. The vision of Carrie Kimmel was absolutely contemporary. It was happening in real time. The voices also used the phrase, "she needs you now," which signals this unprecedented call for active, immediate intervention.
Not just passive historical reporting anymore.
Exactly. This shifts the entire narrative. Rachel is transformed from a passive oracle into an active agent.
And furthermore, Rachel senses an entirely new level of moral imperative with a subsequent target that the spirits point her toward.
That's right. After that immediate Carrie Kimmel vision, the spirit seemed to transfer that urgency to another girl. Rachel feels with certainty that this new girl is a rarity, a treasure.
She's described as a guileless person who brought light and joy to those who knew her, which is a bit different from how Rachel viewed the other victims.
Yeah, in Rachel's own harsh self-assessment, the others were just unfortunate. But this girl is different, and this girl is eventually identified as Patty Patilia, the emo dyke with a guitar.
So Rachel feels compelled to act, despite her physical exhaustion and the high risk of exposure or humiliation. She spends time tracking down the target, leading to this period of intense hypervigilance.
And you see her almost intervene in a completely non-threatening situation with some rowdy boys in a pickup truck. She mistakes normal youthful behavior for the abductor's pattern.
It just highlights the danger of relying on partial information in this, adrenalized state. She's burning herself out trying to act on these urgent but often vague psychic warnings.
But she finally finds Patty Patilia. She's singing a sincere but technically meager tribute to the missing girls at a place called Father Time's Coffee House.
And in Rachel's view, the spirits have made the target obvious by arranging this performance, so she waits, determined to intercept the danger.
But Rachel's direct intervention fails spectacularly, and this is where the human element just crashes head-on into the supernatural drama. Rachel, physically exhausted, looking completely bedraggled, approaches Patty and tries to deliver this vague warning about danger and the need for safety.
She feels like a lunatic or a desperate bodyguard, just blurting out these intense, unspecific fears.
And Patty Patilia, the emo dyke with a guitar, misreads the entire desperate exchange.
It's an agonizing moment of high-stakes social comedy.
Totally. Patty completely misunderstands Rachel's desperate, intense stare and her earnest warning as a romantic overture. She says, "I think you're lovely too, but I should tell you, I'm really not gay."
That misinterpretation is just tragic. Rachel's exhaustion and her lack of social grace prevents the save. She walks away, having utterly failed in her mission, leaving the treasure girl, Patty, still utterly vulnerable.
And that failure will haunt Rachel immediately.
So Rachel's supernatural quest intersects dramatically with the arrival of Ethan Walker. He's a man who triggers this intense, confusing attraction in Rachel, despite his apparent alpha male confidence.
A type she naturally despises after her bruising experiences with her ex-husband, Don.
Their relationship begins not with a spark, but with a volatile confrontation right in Rachel's diner. An ex-Marine named Caleb Johnstone aggressively violates the Madison no-smoking ordinance.
He lights up a cigarette inside, spouting all these offensive opinions about hippies and the city's liberal laws.
And Ethan Walker, who's a contractor and Marty's brother, intervenes with decisive force. He uses his status as a former soldier, referencing his service in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and he just shuts Caleb down instantly.
He reminds him that he fought Saddam Hussein for every loudmouthed asshole in America, a very direct line.
And this action, which should be heroic, is immediately undercut by Rachel's deep-seated aversion to macho bullies and her painful history with Don.
So she throws Ethan out.
She throws him out. Despite her intense, confusing attraction, she dismisses him as just Caleb with better hygiene. She's so blinded by her trauma that she rejects the man who just defended her property.
And what Rachel doesn't know, of course, is the complexity of Ethan's own inner life. It's fueled by severe, unprocessed trauma from Iraq. He is not just an alpha male. He is a broken man beneath a successful exterior.
Our sources are brutally specific about Ethan's condition. He is suffering from immense PTSD-rooted performance anxiety, leading to a critical inability to sustain an erection or climax with women.
Despite intense physical attraction, he calls this state a failure to launch.
And it's directly tied to a specific awful memory. Ethan witnessed a fellow soldier who was also a friend rape and murder an Iraqi girl.
This vivid, awful memory just returns whenever he gets physically intimate with a woman, causing his libido to fail. His brother, Marty, confirms the depth of the secrecy around this. He says Ethan doesn't talk about it, ever.
It's his deeply buried secret, and it's impacting his life profoundly.
It's fascinating because both Rachel and Ethan are walking definitions of sexual frustration rooted in trauma. They're two sides of the same coin.
Right. Rachel requires this supernatural, watery penetration because men are incomplete for her, and Ethan is haunted by a violent memory that destroys any chance of normal, terrestrial physical intimacy.
They are the perfect, necessary counterpoints to each other's suffering.
The sexual tension between them, despite Rachel throwing him out, becomes unbearable. Rachel, still reeling from the failure of her warning to Patty and unable to resolve her own mounting desire without the lake, agrees to meet him.
Even though she believes he likely dates blonde, professional with an immaculate wardrobe and that the date will be a disaster.
But this is the moment of reckoning. The shared confessions. They lay bare their deepest, most shameful secrets. Rachel reveals her lake-based sexuality, her history with Don's fixation, and her dependency on the water.
And Ethan, in turn, responds by confessing his PTSD, the specific horror he witnessed in Iraq, and his subsequent inability to perform sexually. It's a moment of profound vulnerability that changes everything.
They realize their traumas are complementary. And maybe, just maybe, their cure lies in mutual risk.
And the solution is instantaneous, powerful, and physical. They consummate their relationship naked in Lake Monona at Hudson Park.
The very place where Rachel first received that urgent vision.
The act is described as physically intense and mutually successful. It breaks years of physical and emotional limitations for both of them.
It's the ultimate fusion of their individual traumas, leading to mutual healing via the lake. Rachel achieves an orgasm of power that even the lake spirits had never provided her, overcoming her lake-only climax limitation. It's an act of sovereignty over her own body.
And for Ethan, the effect is equally profound. He is fully present. The awful memory of the dead Iraqi girl is sent back into the darkness by Rachel's actions and kisses. He succeeds.
It immediately cures his PTSD-induced performance anxiety. It is essentially a shared somatic exorcism conducted in the cold waters of Lake Monona.
So the relationship instantly becomes profound and transformative. Ethan sleeps soundly that night for the first time in months,
while Rachel is wide awake, filled with elation and energy and a new vivid knowledge of herself.
The physical connection in the water served as the necessary conduit for their emotional and psychological healing. It confirmed that their initial volatile connection was, in fact, necessary for their survival and sanity. They traded secrets, and the lake acted as the ultimate therapist.
So following this intensely curative night, the crisis deepens immediately. The morning brings the discovery of Patty Petilia's disappearance,
A student finds her clothes near Lake Monona jeans, shoes, socks, bra, but crucially, no panties.
which confirms a third major abduction, occurring just after Rachel's failed warning.
And the lack of panties is a critical signature detail of the perpetrator's methodology. It signals that this ritualistic, non-sexual violation is the core objective.
The discovery sends Ethan into a panic. He's fueled by this immediate protective fear for Rachel, who also frequents the lake.
So driven by this raw fear, Ethan jumps to the wrong conclusion. He wrongly suspects Caleb Johnstone, the loudmouth ex-Marine from the diner, and confronts him aggressively at his house.
During this confrontation, he sees a Ford pickup parked there and a strange work shed that has these mutilated magazine centerfolds inside, leading him to believe he's found the predator.
This confrontation is a huge distraction for the authorities. Ethan discovers Caleb's marijuana grow operation, which leads to Caleb's subsequent arrest for felony pot cultivation.
And later, Caleb confesses to the vandalism at Rachel's diner.
Right, so it's a satisfying side quest, catching the jerk who harassed Rachel, but it entirely fails to identify the actual culprit.
The real abductor is soon revealed to be Arlen Corbus.
The gaunt, middle-aged man with the long gray hair and balding top who had accosted Ling Hu, and who had slipped out of Rachel's diner after Ethan's confrontation with Caleb.
He was a former tattoo artist. His shop, Corbus Inc., had recently been forced to close down.
And here is where the twisted motivation is finally revealed. Corbus is terminally ill with pancreatic cancer, with only a few weeks left to live.
This diagnosis provides the horrifying fuel for his mission. It's an existential crisis transformed into an aesthetic imperative.
So we know the motive isn't lethal or purely sexual, but the sources give us a truly unique and chilling answer. What did Arlen Corbus ultimately want from these women?
It was all about rejected art.
Think about that for a second. His driving motivation was this cosmic resentment towards women who had minimal or incomplete tattoos, and critically, who had rejected his artistic vision when his shop was still open.
Rachel, Patty, Carrie, and Faith all fit this profile.
So Corbus, facing his own imminent death, viewed these women's bodies as his canvas.
That suggests a violation that is so much more profound than the traditional predator. He wasn't just taking their bodies, he was taking their personal autonomy, their canvas, to complete a vision they specifically refused, right before he died.
He's imposing his legacy onto their skin.
Absolutely. The source frames this as a non-sexual form of rape, a violent, permanent imposition of his artistic will.
And this is why the panty removal is so telling. It's stripping the personal, intimate dignity without the sexual act. The clothes are removed to expose the canvas, and the victims are kept alive, lucid, and terrified, specifically to experience the violation.
And Rachel realizes the specific nature of this obsession when she is captive. She recognizes Corbus as the man who tattooed her navel 3 years prior.
And she remembers he had strongly pushed her to accept an elaborate forest scene design that would have covered her entire torso.
But she had rejected it, preferring a simple effigy mound silhouette instead.
Now, in his custom-renovated, brightly lit torture room, a former bathroom knocked out into a small bedroom, Corbus begins permanently marking Rachel's skin with that same elaborate forest scene design she had refused.
He treats her body with the cold, clinical gaze of a technician at work. He calls the act art.
Rachel then finds the other victims in the basement below the parlor. Faith Lucas and Carrie Kimmel are naked, bound, and they bear these incomplete black line tattoos along their backs and shoulders.
Like Carrie's faint Celtic knot outline.
Exactly. And Patty Petilia is also there, lucid but terrified.
And Ling Hu's tragic fate is confirmed. She was an accidental victim. Died of an asthma attack exacerbated by sleeping pills Corbus gave her.
He specifically states that he did not kill her. He notes that the death made him feel a little bad, which is why he stopped giving sleeping pills to the remaining victims. He wanted them wide awake to experience his violation.
His motive was always about the art and the violation of their skin, not murder.
The basement scene sets the stage for the climax, where Rachel is forced to shift from passive victim to decisive survivor. And she's driven not by fear for herself, but by a new, specific medical threat to Patty Petilia.
The moment of truth arrives when Rachel, who has successfully removed her gag, notices something scuttling near Patty. It's a black widow spider.
A highly venomous creature, and this recalls a terrifying visceral memory for Rachel. Her uncle's near-fatal bite from an identical spider when she was a child. She immediately understands the deadly seriousness of the threat.
She sees the telltale small, red, barely noticeable bumps where the spider bit Patty. And Rachel realizes Patty's life is now in immediate, time-sensitive danger, especially because Patty's breathing becomes labored.
So she springs into action. She uses her bound fist to smash the spider against the concrete, risking a bite herself.
The medical emergency becomes Rachel's weapon. She rips the tape off Patty's mouth, urging her to stay calm, knowing that panic will just accelerate the poison spread.
The key now is to force Corbus, who is upstairs, to come down into the basement for medical aid, regardless of the consequences for Rachel herself.
But just before that physical confrontation, she utilizes the supernatural connection she forged with Ethan the night before.
She realizes that the small, stagnant puddle of water seeping along the floor's edge is groundwater, and it's connected to the lakes.
So she dips her fingertips into it, initiating this desperate, sensually charged communication with Ethan, hoping the lake spirits will act as a conduit.
This scene is profoundly intense, and it happens simultaneously with Ethan's desperate search. He is skinny dipping in Lake Monona, looking for a clue after Marty told him to stay home.
And across town, Rachel is trapped, bound, freshly tattooed, and she deliberately forces a physical climax, using that groundwater conduit, channeling her desperation into desire.
And Ethan receives the signal. He feels the sudden surge, smelling the musk of female desire that he recognizes from their curative night.
During this massive, mutual, crosstown climax, Ethan has a flash vision of Rachel's belly and the dark tattoo beneath her navel. Not the effigy mound, but the new, imposed forest scene.
This vision is the aha moment that cracks the entire case. Ethan realizes the tattoo is the critical clue. The common denominator linking all the girls was the tattoo artist, Corbus, whose shop closed recently due to his illness.
He races, wet and frantic, to the police station. He convinces Marty that they missed the significance of the tattoos and that the artist himself is the abductor.
Back in the basement, Rachel, no longer gagged and just enraged by Patty's labored breathing, screams for Corbus to come down and help the girl.
When Corbus opens the door, he's dressed in a bathrobe, having been upstairs. Rachel executes this desperate, instantaneous counterattack.
She lunges forward, grabs handfuls of his baggy clothes, and tackles him. Corbus loses his footing and tumbles the length of the wooden steps, landing headfirst on the concrete floor below.
And the sound of his skull hitting the concrete is described as a sharp, sickening, thick melon smacking the concrete.
But the terror doesn't end with the fall. Believing Patty is dead because of the delay and just overwhelmed by the violation she's just endured, Rachel is overcome by her red rage.
She repeatedly batters Corbus's head against the floor until the sound turns squishier. She only stops when Marty Walker and a uniformed officer arrive, guided by Ethan.
The officers find Rachel naked, bloody, partially tattooed, and standing over Corbus's limp body. Marty immediately realizes the gravity of the situation.
And Rachel's immediate, clear response just cuts through the chaos. She bypasses her own trauma and the dead man, and she demands an ambulance for Patty. She prioritizes her fellow victim's status over her own rescue.
The consequences are rapid. Corbus is confirmed dead at the scene from a cerebral hemorrhage, and Rachel is hospitalized with splinters, cuts, and the raw, fresh tattoo.
And the immediate aftermath provides a really complex, unsettling epilogue.
Patty Petilia survives the Black Widow bite and the trauma. She finds this surge of creativity and confidence. She starts booking paying gigs, even organizing a benefit for Carrie Kimmel, who, due to the expense, cannot afford laser tattoo removal.
But the personal drama continues, shifting from the criminal to the social. Julie Schutz, the reporter, visits Rachel in the hospital.
But not for an interview.
No, to deliver a harsh proprietary warning. She tries to assert social dominance, calling Rachel a borderline transient and a mere business owner whose fame will quickly fade.
While Ethan, she says, is a war hero who puts up buildings worth millions.
This warning, alongside the sheer exhaustion of the ordeal, the physical fight, the psychic drain, the violation, it leaves Rachel feeling emotionally numb.
So despite the profound healing connection they forged in the lake just 2 nights prior, she keeps Ethan at a distance. She ends their relationship chastely for the time being.
She cries later, which confirms her feelings, but she prioritizes distance and recovery over intimacy.
Finally, Rachel updates the Lady of the Lakes blog with a deliberately vague, anticlimactic boast. She erases the browser cache to maintain her secret identity and sends her readers to the Capital Journal for the full story.
It's a sign of how utterly drained she is by the experience. She's just unwilling to deal with the public spectacle.
And the story then immediately teases a sequel, Dark Waters. It confirms Rachel's identity as the Lady of the Lakes and sets up a future conflict.
Ethan's construction company is involved in a community-centered development that becomes a source of controversy and murder, just as the Silent Lake spirits cease their communication with Rachel.
Forcing her to find answers entirely on her own. So the trauma of the abductions is solved, but the deeper secrets of the lake and Ethan's life remain untouched.
So we started this deep dive with a conventional missing persons case and ended with a complex analysis of obsession, trauma, and supernatural healing.
I think the deepest insight provided by the source material is how Rachel and Ethan's most personal and painful secrets became the very tools they needed for their mutual salvation and to solve the crime.
Absolutely. Rachel's unconventional sexuality, rooted in her profound connection to the lakes, provided the necessary psychic conduit for the clue that saved their lives.
And Ethan's profound, debilitating war trauma was instantly cured by that same intimate act in the water. That gave him the emotional clarity to recognize the tattoo clue when it appeared in the vision.
The victim's tattoos, rejected pieces of art, were the true fingerprint of the killer, visible only to someone with Corvus's intimate knowledge or Rachel's visionary sight.
The source reminds us that the true facts often lie far outside official channels. They're in the intimate depths of a lake, on an anonymous blog, or buried deep within personal trauma.
The institutional systems, the police, the newspaper, they were perpetually behind the curve, relying on outdated methods.
While the blogger and the contractor, powered by their unconventional histories and that newly forged bond, were the only ones close enough to the truth to actually act.
This whole narrative is predicated on a profound physical and emotional victory. Rachel broke her lake-only climax limitation, and Ethan overcame his PTSD-induced sexual failure. They achieved liberation through absolute intimacy.
Yes, exactly.
Yet after achieving such immense mutual healing and forging an undeniably powerful, loving bond with the man who saved her, Rachel chooses distance and emotional numbness. She pushes Ethan away.
Which brings us to a provocative final thought for you to mull over. What does it mean when a person, after achieving such a profound physical and emotional victory through connection, immediately chooses distance over the bond they worked so desperately to forge?
Is true healing found in absolute independence, even from a powerful, loving connection that literally saved your life?
Or is the distance merely a temporary coping mechanism against the fear of further pain and vulnerability? That choice between radical dependence and radical independence is really the final, unresolved trauma of this deep dive.